Hello and welcome to Upon Further Review, your weekly podcast of high school football here in Northeast Indiana, covering the Summit Athletic Conference, Northeast State, ACAC, you name it, we cover it. Glad to be here with you tonight alongside Eric Doot I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. A lot of things to talk to you about tonight because we're getting to that point in time where we're starting to run down the conference schedule and getting ready for conference championship type of games. And then, of course, we're going to have the draw for the sectional here in a week or so. So we'll get a chance to see what that first round will be looking like here in a couple of weeks tonight. But, dude, just a pretty dominating game by Carroll Friday night. Jimmy Sullivan totaling over 400 yards of offense, and Carroll by far looked the best that I had seen them look all year, especially in the running game. And Nate Starks was not a part of it. He got hurt early, and Jimmy Sullivan took it over. And DeJuan Green is the young kid that came in and did quite well. And but they got Jimmy Sullivan involved more in the offense, not just throwing the ball.
Yeah, big night for Carroll, big night for Jimmy. I think 400 yards of total offense on the ground and through the air, and his ability to hurt Homestead both ways really proved dividends. And then you mentioned it, just DeJuan Green coming in. Carroll did battle some injuries, especially in that first half. Braden Steely it was one of them.
Justin
Anderson on the defensive side of the ball. So I don't think, hopefully long-term for them, I think it's just one of those things where the length of the season, you just get rolled up on or something like that. So hopefully for them, they'll be able to continue to shine like they have all year. But yeah, Jimmy Sullivan had a big night, and the ability for him to, find new weapons for that Carroll offense and to continue to keep rolling because, you had a little confidence for Homestead in there with what they were able to do with Snyder a week ago. And then just really overall the season, I know they had that hiccup against Bishop Dwenger a few weeks back, but for Homestead, they were looking good. And then for Carroll to put it away so early with that, Sullivan, 235 yards through the air, 22 of 31 with a touchdown, then 200 yards rushing and a touchdown. I mean, I don't know the last time we've seen a quarterback in our area rush for 250 or 200 yards. So that's something that we may have to track down in the next couple of days and have that on the pregame show, that trivia question. But a really great performance by the Carroll Chargers all around, and they get the big victory, 41-20 over Homestead at home, and kind of basically knock Homestead out of that contention for an SAC title or a share of it. Carroll continues to stay alive, though Lures is now still undefeated in the league and at 5-0, and
they can do no worse than a tie.
Win for them as well.
They could do no worse than a tie now, it looks like, in some respects, if they, get to that last game in the same position they are now. And whatever happens in that Homestead game may not, either outright or a tie. But going back to Carroll, people forget that Jimmy Sullivan can run the ball, and he can do it quite effectively. I don't know why they waited till this week to really start involving him more in the run game. I don't know if it was because they were, just being cautious with him, not wanting to take too many hits, which I can understand. But he completely showed that he's more than just a one-dimensional quarterback. And I think that in itself paid a big dividend for him. And then, like you said, Bishop Lures and their continued streak that they're on, going for 2 in overtime to win it and getting that done. And it was just pretty good to see from Carroll's perspective because they had not ran the ball very good. They got what they needed running the football against a quality defense. Jimmy did a good job of spreading the ball around, targeting of different receivers because he just wasn't going to Hafner all the time. So it was a pretty dominant performance and a little surprising to a degree. But we kind of knew if Carroll ever put it all together and they got some semblance of a running game, they were going to be a tough team to really deal with, especially on both sides of the ball, which they did on Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
Green,
you,
3 touchdowns
yeah,
for him. So
yeah.
a coming out party for him, a name that we haven't heard much. We've kind of talked about the Carroll rushing offense and kind of trying to figure out to get that going. Nate Starks had a really good season a year ago. Hasn't quite found the same success, though. I think there's a lot more options there for Carroll. So it's not like it's just Nate Starks, and because he doesn't have 100 yards of rushing, Carroll's offense, rush offense is shut down or anything. It's just they've been able to, air it out. And then also here comes some other guys. They mix in Braden Steely with that kind of that wildcat formation. And for them,
they did there for a little bit.
So, yeah, and looking at the SAC standings now, just coming in, like you mentioned, it Lures atop the SAC now, all alone, still at 5-0, and then it's Snyder and Carroll at 4-1 in the A division. Now, remember, it's overall standings based off of that. So, really, it's kind of down to those three at this point. I know Lures has to play Homestead, and Carroll, and Snyder are still in it. I know Snyder beat Carroll, so that head-to-head there is there. But I think if there's more than two teams that are tied, you're ultimately guaranteed a three-way share. But if it's, and of course, Lures does not play Snyder or Carroll, so they can win the SAC without playing Snyder or Carroll and just playing Homestead and Dwenger. But still, so a lot of football to be played. We're at week 8 this Friday. And some important matchups there to help decide things, and not just in and Coach, you talked about a wild Friday night, not just in the SAC, but the NE8 with East Noble, what they did to Columbia City. We had New Haven keep rolling. In the ACAC, we had Heritage knock off Bluffton, which was number 1 in the team, and then we also had in the NECC. West Noble beating Lakeland in overtime to clinch the big school division there. So a lot of fun Friday football tonight. And I know, we've got a big show, Coach, tonight with a couple guests that will help all break it down.
Yeah, it's one of those things that looks like I'm
you're here.
I'll go ahead and talk through it as I get reconnected here. But yeah, we had some surprising scores, really. You had the East Noble game, which you talked about. You had the Heritage game that really kind of shocked everybody when you really think about it in terms of what they were able to do. On top of that, and just it's that time of year. You're going to get these surprise wins. That game with Bluffton and Adams Central still will ring to be a big game in the sense that Bluffton could go in there with a chance to earn a tie by beating them, beating Adams Central. But Heritage just completely dismantled them on Saturday or Friday night, and it was pretty big night there. And we've got some fun scenarios that could happen around Northeast Indiana. But I don't know. Maybe we should think about bringing in the big QB from East Noble now, Zander Brazel, who had a pretty good night, 6'11", 109 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then the East Noble had over 239 yards rushing on Friday night in their game against Columbia City. Zander, welcome. Appreciate you coming on here this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little bit about the big night on Friday night against Columbia City. Being that it was a 35-0 shutout, was that kind of surprising for you guys in terms of the type of game that you had against them?
Not at all. We go into every game expecting a shutout and to put a bunch of points on the board. We have a really, really talented defense, and up front on the offensive line, I think we're one of the best in the state. If you look at all of our games, all of our wins, it always starts up front on our offensive and defensive line. And those two groups for us are just super, super dominant. And so seeing that shutout against a, a more run heavy team just doesn't really surprise us a whole lot.
Yeah, Zander, talk about this season for you. I mean, the ups and downs of playing in the NE8. I know for you guys, early season success, you get into NE8 play, you're always against stiff competition, and then you fall at East or Leo, and then you dominate Columbia City on Friday, and now you got the big matchup with New Haven this Friday. Just talk about this season and really where this East Noble team is right now, about 2/3 of the way through the year.
Yeah, we started off the season playing two really, really solid teams. You look at Lures right now, like you talked about earlier, they're contending to win the SAC, and then we go play against Snyder, one of the best teams in the state. And we beat Lures pretty big, and we compete with Snyder to the very end of the game. Those two games kind of set a tone for us and gave us a confidence that we're a really good team. But not only that, as you get into now, we're playing our best football, and a lot of people have always said to me, best ability is availability. We're all really healthy. We all feel really good, and that's just a huge, huge advantage for us as this season goes on. And I just couldn't ask for a better circumstance right now.
Your development as a quarterback, what have you been able to really do the last, 3-year starter now? Is that right for East Noble?
Yes, sir.
So talk about your growth in that regard, the ability for you to be a 3-year starter. How is that? What has that meant for you to be in that system, in that program like that for the last 3 years as a starting quarterback?
Yeah, it's especially in a program like East Noble, being a 3-year starter and giving the keys of the car as a sophomore is just a really big honor. Not a lot of people get to do it. I think I was the first in like 19-ish years is the number to start all 3 years, every game, all 3 years, which is just something that's just means a lot to me. But not only that, just kind of, looking at my sophomore to my senior year, the game's just slowed down a lot for me. Last year was a little bit of a struggle. I battled some shoulder injuries all season, and that kind of led to some inaccuracies, some shoulder instability, stuff like that. And, I really just took this off season to get super accurate, build up my shoulder stability, and just kind of just be our guy, that I knew my guys needed me to be.
Hey, Zander, let's look ahead here to the New Haven game. Big week for you guys, just like in the Northeast 8, you go 1 week, you have to rise up. Next week, you got the same thing. You got another tough opponent to take on. What are some of your thoughts on New Haven and their defense, and just kind of a roll down of what you've been able to learn about the Bulldogs?
Yeah, obviously the guys that stick out when you watch film are the dude that's going to go to Ohio State next year and go probably play in the league. Like, dude's special. I play with him all summer long too. He jumps out on film. The dude you can't really throw out a whole lot because he's going to make you pay. Another dude that sticks out is a Johnny Washington. Another dude you can't really throw out a whole lot. But I think we feel really comfortable with how physical we are and how that matches up front. Like I said it earlier, I think that, our front five or front six, if you include our tight end, is just a really, really special group. There's not a lot of teams that have been able to stuff the run, if any at all. You look at the NE8 as a whole, we lead the conference in total offense and like least amount of offense allowed. And I think that really shows what we're capable of. But going back to what sticks out on film, I think we just have to be able to do our job every single play. And as simple as that sounds, it's really real for us. I think that we have a lot of talent. We don't have that Division I guy or the, guys with a bunch of offers, but we're a bunch of dudes from Kendallville that love playing football, and we do it at a really high level.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think is the biggest difference from New Haven of last year to a New Haven of this year? Because in some respects, with the exception, I guess, Washington, it's kind of the same team that you're going to face again Friday night. So what is it that you guys have seen that's, made the biggest difference for New Haven?
I think it's something that's very similar with us. And you look at us and it's essentially the same team that played last year. It's a bunch of dudes that have at least 1 year of varsity experience, and that's huge. Dudes that the moment's not too big for them anymore when it's time to make that play. And so, just being able to have confidence in everyone around you is huge. And just dudes that know what they're doing and know how to do it every single play is just huge. And the fact that we have that and the fact that they have that is just going to make this a really good matchup.
You mentioned Zander being those dudes from Kendallville. One thing we all in 1380 game of the week this week up in Kendallville for the New Haven at East Noble game. That atmosphere, everybody talks about it, from the home teams to the away teams to the people, the trucks that line the fence, and just the support of Kendallville, Rome City, those type of communities. Leato, can't forget them. East Noble as a general. What is it like on Friday night to run out of that inflatable tunnel and to play in front of that crowd in that school community?
It's just a really, really special place. I remember being an 8th grader on the state run that we had in 19 and being the ball boy in the semi-state game against Hobart, and how there's the most amount of people I've ever seen in a game. At least I thought that at that point. And then week 2, a Snyder comes around after we beat a good Lures team, and it's even more packed. And just the amount of community support that we have week in and week out is just unmatched anywhere. One thing that me and Coach Amstutz joke about a lot is we're one of the 2 people that, walk into Don Chico's in Kendallville or walk into Jenny's Tacos or just even the Applebee's. It's one of those things where you win big, everybody knows, but when you lose, everybody also knows. So it's kind of an unavoidable community in that sense, but I just wouldn't trade it for the world. It's just really, really special.
Your development as a quarterback, what kind of holds next to you? You're a senior now. Have you kind of thought of, what is next for you as far as, playing in college, or what does that look like? What's the next step for you after high school football is over?
Yeah, so I actually just got my first scholarship offer probably like an hour ago from Lawrence Tech, an NAIA.
Okay, congrats.
Right here. So yeah, thank you so much. Definitely looking to go play college ball, and then just kind of see where that takes me. Just go try to play 4 more years of ball.
What are you wanting to study? That's the big question.
So right now I'm leaning towards biochem, and then taking that into anesthesiology and becoming an anesthesiologist.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of them since I've had a lot of surgeries. So if you need any contacts out there, you could probably hit me up, but I probably could put you in touch with a few.
I definitely that.
Well, like Doot says, we're going to be up there Friday night, and we enjoy that atmosphere that Kendallville embraces us when we come up to see you guys play. And I tell you, it's one of those things that definitely is a big difference.
Yeah, I think Shannon's having a little mic difficulties there, and cutting in and out. But well, Zander, we wish you the best of luck this weekend. We're looking forward to coming up to Kendallville for the 1380 game of the week with the New Haven Bulldogs. We'll be on the air at 7:00 for the kickoff. The pregame show starts at 6 in that regard, and it's a great atmosphere. If I know that a lot of New Haven people will be there, and on top of it, it goes a long way in some of the NE8 implications. So it should be a fun one up there. We wish you the best of luck, Zander, and certainly best of luck the rest of the season. And congrats on the first scholarship offer. And we'll look forward to maybe see you play some college ball as well.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate the opportunity for me having me on.
All right, no problem.
Thanks, Zander.
That was Zander Brazel, the talented quarterback from I should say Brazel.
Brazel.
It's
Yeah.
different people. I always got to check myself. Zander Brazel, the Brazel Dazzle from East
That's
Noble
right.
High School. Big matchup on Friday, Coach, with New Haven. He mentioned it. The similarities of these two teams, and trying to break through. I know, this is the first time I think since 2017 that New Haven is sitting at 6-0, 7-0 now.
Right.
7-0. And this, and it was 4 years ago that East Noble made it to the state championship. So these two teams have seen success within recent years. And this really becomes a big game because you have undefeated in the NE8 and overall New Haven, but then you also have East Noble that is sitting one game behind that tough loss to Leo. Leo sitting at 3-1 also. Just a lot of different things that go into Friday night that we could see out there as far as possible implications moving forward as this goes into the final week of the season.
Yeah, and I'm hoping my mic's not cutting out now. So, but Columbia City plays at Leo on Friday night. That's going to be a big game for both squads, in hopes of staying in, as close to possible, just in case something would happen. But I think it's going to be New Haven's biggest challenge of the year because of having to go to Kendallville, going on the road, playing in a hostile environment that will be on Friday night. Always is a challenge to get your guys in the right framework, frame of mind to play in that type of ball game, especially so close to being able to claim the NE8 championship. That's the key component of all of this, because like you said, there's so much things that can happen because of what occurred, with East Noble handling Columbia City. That puts Leo back in the mix of things. Now Leo plays Columbia City this week. And so it's kind of like the SAC in that regard, that there are some different scenarios there that maybe lets a team back, come in the back door of a conference championship, because that's what kind of Carroll's hoping for to a degree. If DeWanger could rise up and beat a Snyder, then that ultimately puts Carroll right there in the back door of things, with Lures. So it's going to be a great contest. Looking forward to it. We get, they treat us great up there, as has everybody. We've always had great hosts when we've come on site and put up the 1380 tent, and Adam Lundy and the job that he does to help us get on the radio, so that we can do that type of broadcast is not easy.
No.
Let's just put it that way. And then the different schools that have, again, welcomed us into their environment and made us feel at home. And, it's been always a great trip to Kendallville for what we get to go and up there and watch play on Friday night.
Yeah. And I think it's a testament to the NE8. And we always talk about how, majority of our podcast and conversations tend to be about the SAC, but this is another big weekend for not just the SAC, but the NE8. Obviously, our game of the week is New Haven at East Noble, but ACAC with Bluffton and Adams Central. And we'll talk about some of these games later, but you talk about the backdoor type of things, with Adams Central and Bluffton playing each other. If Bluffton were to knock off Adams Central, all of a sudden Heritage is back in the mix again. And the NECC, with the big and small division, we had a big division championship wrapped up last Friday. This week is East Side and Central Noble for the small division. So it's really cool because we are in the penultimate week of the regular season, the second to last week, and it's an opportunity for teams to to start seeing some championship dreams come to fruition. And I think, when we talk about Lures, I mean, the ability for them, we mentioned it. They beat Wayne by 3. They beat Northside by 2, and then they beat Dwenger by 1 in overtime. And it's tough to be undefeated in the SAC. The way that Lures has been able to do it has been really tried and true, regardless of the division they're in or who they're playing against. You play who's on your schedule. And if your schedule doesn't have Snyder and Carroll, then your schedule doesn't have Snyder and Carroll. And that's basically how it works.
Yeah, right. And, they're a smaller school. And like you said, they've played the schedule that was dealt to them. And they've done it after getting down on early in the year. And they've caught fire now. And they gambled on Friday night, and it paid off, going for 2 in that first overtime session. And we talked about this. We talked about it extensively about Kyle Lindsay and how he has the ability to really hone in on what his kids do well and what he needs to stay away from. And I think that's exactly what he did after that first couple of games. And they weren't playing slouches now, because they had New Haven in those early contests, and look how good they've become. So they've played good teams, and yeah, I know there's probably going to be some rumblings in the sense of, they didn't play so-and-so, but that's what happens to happen when you want 2 non-conference games. You have to give and take something. Yep. And I think the coaches in the Summit Athletic Conference felt that having the ability to play outside the conference competition was far greater than to have, an equitable whatever for the conference race. So, and they may tweak it after this year, who knows, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And don't take anything away from Bishop Lures at all, because like you said, winning is hard. There's a lot of teams out there that would clamor to have the opportunity that Lures has, but they've done what they've needed to do, and they've done it offensively, and they've got it done defensively. So it's going to be an interesting week, even for Snyder, because they got to play Dwenger. Dwenger's coming off a heartbreak loss, but they still, this is a big game for them with Snyder. It's kind of a second rivalry week for them in that regard. And Snyder will have to play good football to get by him.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Lures, for them, they lost the first 2 games of the season. Though, ironically, given this week, it was to New Haven and then East Noble, and so and they lost pretty bad. 45 to, I should say, East Noble was first, 45-7 in week 1. Week 2 to New Haven, 36-7. So I mean, for them, they got things back right on track in a hurry. It helped the progression. I mean, you can see the progression of Lure's schedule, where they start Northrop, then Wayne, then Concordia, then they move on to Northside, then they build up to Dwenger. Now they have Southside this week, which they should be able to take care of business. But there again, it's still business. You got to get the job done. And then, closing out the regular season at Homestead, and walking into Dave Walter Stadium doesn't mean that you're going to just guaranteed an SAC title either that night either. It's going to be a dogfight there too. So it's been fun to watch this Lures team. They're riding high. Cohen McKenzie is their quarterback, is starting to come on big time for them. Mickey Darling, Gio Jimenez, just a lot of different pieces that make that team go. And I think it's a younger team. So, I mean, this is a team that's really establishing themselves for the next couple of years too.
Well, and, there are some teams that have the fortunate that they can just kind of reload. There are some teams that have to, like East Noble, they've had to ride a class that was young last year, and now they're a year older, and you can see that they've gotten better. And you can say the same thing about New Haven. They've bolted the 5-5 curse that they've had for the last 2 years, and have a great opportunity to do what they need to do. And then, Snyder, they're a very good team. they caught Homestead on a night that it was just Homestead's night. It turned into Homestead's night, and unfortunately Snyder came up short in that overtime game. And but I guarantee it, they'll be wound and ready to go on Friday. At DeWanger.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big one. And I think this is what the way the schedule is, and you try to keep some of those traditional matchups still, like Lures and Southside. Yes, those two teams may be at different levels in different areas, but that old fashioned battle of Calhoun Street brawl, as they call it. Dwanger and South or Snyder is a big one. Northside and Wayne really has a lot more context to it too, because I think winnable game for those two teams as well. So it should be a fun one in that regard and across the board.
Because Northside will get Tay Johnson back after that 1 game suspension. And I think Wayne's played a little better, in terms of holding on to the ball. That's been their Achilles heel this year is the turnovers and those type of things that's hurt them all year. But that has the makings of being a really good game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of the SAC and of course the NE8 as well. Columbia City Leo, another one that has some implications, because for Columbia City, what do we make of them at this point? Here they lose 2 weeks ago to New Haven, 21-7, tough loss. That kind of spills over into this week in some regards. They lose 35-0 at home to a very good East Noble team. Now you go against Leo this coming week, and it's like Columbia City is in danger of losing 3 straight after looking dominant the first 5.
Yeah. It's kind of the flip of what New Haven's kind of done over the last couple of years, because now they all have this meat grind of a schedule where they play the top teams back to back to back. And that's kind of what happens to all of them. And Columbia City is no different. They've played some tough ball clubs here the last 2 weeks. Surprised at the score Friday night that East Noble went in there and dominated the game, and that they did. I was trying to see if there was a lot of turnovers in that game, and I meant to ask Zander that question, because a game of that stature and then them having getting 35 points was kind of surprising in that regard, without there being some type of issues with turnovers and such. So I'm trying to pull up the stats outside.
Looking at the stat sheets, the box score from Friday. 1 turnover in the whole game. It was an interception for Columbia City. They the interception. But key there, 236 total yards for Columbia City.
Yeah, I was just going to say
239 yards rushing. So East Noble had more rushing yards than what Columbia City had total. They were pretty split even, 118 yards passing, 118 yards rushing for the Eagles. But 3 for 13 on 3rd down, and then the 1 for 4 on 4th down. So they did take care of the ball. I think it was just an onslaught from the beginning from East Noble, that Columbia City was just never able to stem the tide. And I think that was what we saw Friday night, because I was very surprised. I was very surprised in this type of game, the way their defense have been playing for Columbia City, that A, they got shut out, and then B, they gave up 35 on top of it to East Noble.
Well, East Noble got them out of, Columbia City is one of those teams that has that modified wing bone, or, the same stuff that Adams Central likes to run. And when you get down, it's hard to come back from a deficit running what they do, because everything is so intertwined. They're not a pure drop back passing team. And that's reflective in the statistics from Friday, because Bradbury was 9 of 19, which is, kind of reflective of maybe them having to drop back and throw it more than they are accustomed to. And, they did, East Noble, it sounds like to me, really dominated defensively against them.
Yeah.
Pretty much all night. Shut down the run. Now Stratton Fuller had his catches. He had 7 catches for 101 yards, but he didn't ever get his longest catch was 29 yards, and he had no touchdowns. So, East Noble did yeoman's work defensively to get that game done. And then their offense, of course, given the opportunities they needed to run the football, they ran it and ran it well and got Reinbold had a big game, and Crayo, he had a big, game. And so East Noble with Coach Amstutz is a good coach, and he finds ways to, again, put his kids in the best possible position to have high success on Friday nights, whether it's offense or defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things about Columbia City coming into this game was that they were a team that was averaging upwards of 250 yards rushing per game.
Yeah.
So if you hold them to 118, I mean, that is a dominant performance from your defense. Yeah. You may not force a turnover. You may not, but that in and of itself is because you're slowing the game down. You're shortening the possessions. You're getting your defense off the field. And then on top of it, you're just not letting them move the ball down the field like they have been all year. So, yeah, Stratton Fuller got his catches. Bradbury looked okay. But that rush offense never took off for the Columbia City Eagles. And I think that was a big part of it.
Right. And this is what going into this Friday night's game up there at East Noble is – you get to this time of year, we have yet to have any bad weather. It's going to be above normal temperature wise this week as we are in October already, which is another conversation that we could have later. But you've got to be able to run the football this time of year, because as the year goes on, you're going to face some colder temperatures and some weather that may be not up to snuff to be able to throw it quite a bit. So this is a time that the Trey Bates of the world needs to excel for New Haven, and as well as all the different Donovan Williams and his ability to run the football as well is going to be important for them, because everybody's going to be geared up for Milan Graham. There's no question about that. And that's why Johnny Washington's had big games, as has Hardy, because as teams decide to give up what they don't have to cover Milan Graham with, it's better for them to try their chances with covering Hardy or Washington in a one-on-one situation. So it's one of those things that it's going to be important for New Haven to have a great start at Kendallville. They cannot give East Noble any type of hope, because I think if you give a team like East Noble hope, even though you may out-athlete them, as soon as they get that feeling that they got a chance, that's when you're going to get your best from them. And you see it all the time. And when teams don't put teams away, it's kind of like with Snyder and Homestead. They got up 14-0, and instead of putting Homestead away, they let them back in the game. And next thing you know, they're in a dogfight. And that's typical teams when you are going up against a team that you should outclass. Happens when you do the things you need to do to take them out of the game, and you give them hope, then you're in a dogfight.
Yeah, and looking at New Haven, we always talk about not overlooking your opponent. They played Belmont last Friday, easily the worst team in our area, and worse is probably, it is what it is. But the least successful team, we'll put it that way. We're dealing with high school kids, we'll say it that way. But I think, it was pedal to the metal for New Haven back then too. I mean, right out of the gate, Johnny Washington, 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. So he finishes with 5 catches, 128 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Donovan Williams, 142 yards through the air with 3, all 3 to Johnny. And then Donovan added 1 on the ground. Trey Bates found pay dirt as well. James Hardy got in the mix. And the thing is, too, with this New Haven team is that they're mixing in guys like a Johnny, guys like James Hardy IV in on the defensive side of the ball. So, just as soon as a Johnny Washington goes for 3 touchdown catches, he's also and on the defensive side getting turnovers as well. James Hardy with a big blocked field goal this week on the defensive side of things. And so they have those playmakers that really you can insert them into anywhere on the field and they can make plays happen. I mean, you easily could have Donovan Williams as your running back for this team because he's just that talented. He's a bigger quarterback. He's a bigger kid. His ability to find, the weapons and then just the open space for guys like a Johnny and Mylan Graham. I mean, that's what's hard is because Zander mentioned it, D1 talent, and for them to have that, but also too, like East Noble says at the end of the day, we may not have the D1 talent this year. They haven't had it in the past, but the maturation of that program overall and their work in the weight room and their work in getting speed and the performance training that they do in the summer and things like that, that really helps them to close that gap a little bit. And it does rear its head sometimes. I mean, New Haven versus Belmont is really going to rear its head as far as the talent levels. But I think, we've seen Leo really take off in that regard. We've seen Columbia City now put some good teams together. East Noble's another one, New Haven now. So it's been fun to see these teams take off and continue to down the road that they've taken, because for New Haven, it's been a while. For East Noble, it's been a few years, and now they're going to collide on Friday night. And, it was just 2 weeks ago that East Noble took it on the chin in a 14-7 loss to Leo. But you know what? They're still in it. And Leo is still having a mathematical chance and all of that. I think continue to play well, these opportunities arise. And, oh, by the way, I think all those guys are probably in the same sectional too. New Haven, East Noble,
I'm just going to say that. Thank you.
I mean, it's going to be an insane sectional once we get to that point as well.
It's almost unfair to have a sectional that loaded when you think about the number of teams that have a chance to come out of that, because, Leo has lost 2 ball games by the total of 2 points or something like that. It's been crazy. They had New Haven and they lost that one in overtime by a point, I believe. And, the game at Kokomo, and Kokomo's no joke, which one of these teams is probably going to face coming out of that sectional, out of sectional 19. Right there it is. I mean, you got Dwanger in there. I mean, that's a great sectional. Now, the only one that's not in there is Columbia City, so they must have switched.
Okay. They might, I think, because and this is the weirdest thing, too. Dwanger was 5A. They were even ranked in Class 5A at the beginning of the season. And I think it was after week 1, the IHSA comes down and rules that they're in Class 4A now, assigns them to Sectional 19. And I think that pushed Columbia City out. So I'm going to do a little bit down the rabbit hole and see where Columbia City is now. Columbia City's in 20. So you have 20. So yes, Columbia City got moved to that sectional 20 with, basically the only school. I mean, you do throw in Huntington North got moved as well. So I think there's a certain element for Huntington North that they kind of breathe a sigh of relief just because they don't have to face some of those Fort Wayne schools. But yes, because Columbia City and Wayne were the sectional game that we did last year for the 1380 game of the week to open the postseason play. So it's changed. Excuse my clicking through it here again, but it's changed the landscape of that. So Wayne is still in there, but I mean, and look, if you draw a matchup like Wayne versus Leo or a Wayne versus, DeKalb versus, Wayne, or I mean, there's some intriguing matchups, and the way the ping pong balls fly, you're probably going to see some matchups that we saw. And of course, you have Southside and Angola in there. I mean, Southside versus Angola, we're all hypothetical a couple weeks ago. We haven't drawn the second, but I mean, if that's a first round matchup, that bodes well probably for both teams. So, I mean, that's what's nice about the postseason. And I think we've talked about it before, Coach, is the ability that, now we're in week 7 and heading into week 8. So a lot of things have been decided for some schools that they realize, okay, I'm not going to win a conference, or we're just trying to end this 4-game losing streak or whatever. But that's the nice thing about sectionals too, is that it is a new season for a lot of these teams. And when you're a team that has struggled all year, like a Southside or an Angola, or even a DeKalb that's kind of been mediocre, like you draw Southside in the first round, and then, Angola gets the bye, and all of a sudden it's DeKalb versus Angola in a sectionals, whatever, however that looks.
Well, there's going to be crazy things that happen. Yeah, there's going to be crazy things that happens, but the sectionals gives everybody a new start. That's, some people say that's a bad thing, because you can get to the point where you got some teams that really shouldn't be in it, and then all of a sudden they get hot and find that they're, they win out and they're in the regionals, or, we've seen that before where a team has had, a 500 record and, made it to the semi-state or whatever. But at the same time, it does create some excitement for these teams, because now, again, like I said, they go into the playoffs 0-0. What happened doesn't have any factor at all in what's in front of them. And the teams that have been riding high all year still have to perform at a big level. And that's what makes it difficult sometimes for some of these schools, because unfortunately they may have a bad game, and that may be week 1 of the sectionals, and find themselves getting beat. And that's that's the hard part. Because I know we've had this conversation before that we would wish in the playoffs, especially at least for the first round of the sectionals, that they would seed it so that you could get, instead of a Leo versus New Haven in week 1, you have New Haven playing Angola, or New Haven playing a DeKalb, depending on how the records fall out, and you have a 1 versus 6 or 1 versus 5, or however that works. And the IHSA is just never going to do that. I mean, they're just not. And
they let everybody in.
Well, that's
places
my
like
point.
Ohio, not everybody gets in. And
they all got.
I mean, not that would ever change either. And I don't mind every school playing. I think it's consistent in that regard, and it's probably more along the lines of the basketball aspect of it that people think of. But I mean, I think for football, and the issue becomes hard to seed. I mean, if we go back to that sectional, I mean, and I know we're kind of getting in the weeds because we're not even at the regular season yet, but I mean, how do you differentiate between a Dwenger and a Leo in a seeding, or you know what I mean, or a East Noble and a Wayne? It's very hard. I mean, you go overall record or whatever, but it's like it's a very different. It's very hard when you start roping in. Now, luckily, this is just all for the most part SEC and NE8, but I mean, there are some sectionals out, especially that one we looked at, sectional 20, where you have Columbia City and Huntington North and Mississinawa and Jay County. It's like you got half of the state in the northern half of the state conference represented in there. So it's I can understand where it's hard to do it that way. I think there's always that at the back of my mind, the idea of, okay, are they actually drawing the ping pong balls, or is this like is it a work, as they say in some, is it a place where they're telling us they drew the balls, and and so be it? Because sometimes some of those matchups, you're just like, and I guarantee you in that 19, we're going to get something like Dwenger versus Leo off the bat. And then on the other side, it's going to be like, Southside and Angola, and they're going to get the buys. And great for them. Hey, that's the way it works. It's just like you play who's in front of you. And if Southside doesn't have to play anybody in week 1, great for
Right.
the Archers. But I think that's always been my issue, is that it's kind of like, all right, really? I mean, are we really going to, but
well, that's why we talk about the seeding component, and you could always bring in the Sagarin ratings to break up the same record of 2-5 and 6-2 teams and break it up via Sagarin. But again, those are all things that football people would like to see done. It's just it's not practical with the number of teams that are in the tournament when it starts off that in a couple weeks. But I think we'll have to see where everything shakes out. We'll have more about that probably next week, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the draw is next week.
I think it is. I think it's
usually a week before the end. So it's not, but yeah.
Yeah. I think
you'll have that one regular season win in there. I mean, short of looking at
I think it's next Sunday is when they draw.
Yeah. So
it's usually, that's usually how it plays out. But
anyway, before we get to that part of it, I think we can go ahead and start to look at the games we do have this week. We have a loaded schedule, Coach, and for our viewing audience and listening audience too, we can even delve into some of the other non-SAC games that we have on the slate as well. But if you look at the SAC week 8, obviously, I think the one that highlights this grouping is Snyder at Dwenger, a big one out at Shields Field, the rivalry game that has some potential SAC implications there, because you still have Dwenger and Snyder in the mix there, and Snyder with one loss in the SAC. But this is an old-fashioned, it's become a rivalry. It's a big game on the north end of town, and these two teams get after it. And I think it actually is. I can say this is a Snyder grab. I think it's more of a rivalry than the actual said rivalry of Snyder and Northwest.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate conversation, and it goes back a number of years too. It's just not of recent year. I mean, Snyder Dwenger's had a long, storied history of really good teams, and then these games having a meaningful component to it. And it does still have a meaningful component to it this Friday night. Snyder still controls their destiny. It's that, and Dwenger's kind of playing a little bit of the spoiler. Maybe they can knock them off and prevent them from, sharing a title with potentially Bishop Luers. So there's a lot riding on the line Friday night out there at Shields Field, and it's going to take a really good defensive performance from Bishop Dwenger because of what Snyder has in firepower. Uriah Buchanan is the top running back, and then you got Billingsley, who can do a little bit of everything, and then Snyder's defense is really good. So it'll be a tough matchup, no question about it. But as you look at it from what is the best game in the Summit City this week, it's definitely that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And not too far behind, I would argue. I mean, obviously, there's a little bit more riding in that Snyder-Dwenger game, but Wayne at Northside's another good one, because these are two teams that I think Wayne, we mentioned it week to week. Wayne started out hot and has kind of found their own level in the weeks that have followed. And Northside is kind of the opposite of that, in that they didn't start out so hot. They get Tay Johnson in as quarterback, and they've kind of ridden that to some success. Obviously, he's back from suspension this week, so it should be a full tilt game. But there again, a game like this, when you say Wayne and Northside, I think emotions are going to get high, I would have to think, in this one, because a winnable game for both teams.
Yeah, and they're both struggling for wins, and they've not maybe had the season that they had both had hoped at that they would at the beginning of the year. Northside is, lost Tay last week for his 2 unsportsmanlikes, and he's a guy that you just can't replace on the field. It's just, especially with what he brings to the table. And then, Wayne's problem, I think we've diagrammed that pretty easily with the number of turnovers that they've had, because when they don't turn the ball over, they're a really good team. I mean, you got Sharon and some other guys out there that can really fly. I mean, these guys are really good athletes, and that's what makes Wayne scary. Wayne's a team that you're always scared about because of you watch them and you see the talent on the field, and it's just like, man, I don't want them to get it right this week when we play them, because if they do get it right, it's going to be a game because of what they bring to the table. And that's what that game is, like you said, has the chance to be probably darn good ball game out at is that Chambers Field?
Yep,
Is that
Chambers Field
Northside?
out at
Yeah.
Northside. So yeah, that'd be good. The other
There-
three, I think, are pretty. I mean, Southside at Lures, the Calhoun Street Brawl. I think Lures should win that one big. Homestead at home over Concordia. Concordia really struggling. Northrop host Carroll. Carroll should walk away easily with that one. So I think in the SAC, it's pretty much those two games that are kind of got some intrigue to them. But really, Coach, if we go on and we mentioned it, the other kind of games of the week, we talk about it, our 1380 game of the week, New Haven and East Noble on Friday with a lot. And also we mentioned it too, Columbia City at Leo. I mean, two very good teams, two teams, still a lot to play for, because Columbia City only took their first loss, or now they're at 2, I should say. That is true, but there's still a lot to play for in trying to play spoilers for Leo and some of the things that they have. And so that should be a fun one up in Leo Cedarville between the Eagles and the Lions.
Yeah, it'll be. I mean, that game has always been a tough ball game for both of them, regardless of where each team has been record-wise. You know, they had a dogfight last year in that game, and I remember Columbia City kind of, eking it out, and they had them at home. So going to Leo and playing, it's going to be a tough matchup for them, and talent-wise with Caden Hurst and Schott and these guys that are big time players. It's going to be a tough game for a school like Columbia City to come in and match up against with their size and talent that East Noble has, because that's what East Noble brings to the table, especially defensively. That'll be the big thing. But that being said, Columbia City is capable of winning that game, as we've seen before, and that's what makes the Northeast State so the competitive balance that's in that league, for the most part, is what makes that league an exciting league to be a part of, because each and every week a number of teams have the chance to beat the other. It's not, you get in this part of the year, you bet that Northeast 8 is going to have at least 2 to 3 games that are going to be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, the ACAC, not to be outdone down there. The big one down there, Adams Central at Bluffton. Adams Central rolling all season long. They, been back to state twice now, going for 3 in a row. Of course, that's down the line yet, but this big one down in Bluffton. Bluffton comes off the tough loss at Heritage last Friday, 27-21. They were number 1 in the state in that game, falling in the polls a bit this week. But this is kind of, I guess, in a way, the de facto ACAC championship, just based off of the schedules, because I think this is Adams Central's last ACAC game. No, I stand corrected. Adams Central has Woodland next week, but then Bluffton, this is Bluffton's last ACAC game of the year. So, if they can knock off Adams Central and give them the one loss, then you've got some ties there. And I see how all that works out too, because the interesting schedule of the ACAC.
Well, the best thing for Bluffton is that even though they lost the way they did, and as surprising of a loss that was, I didn't think them losing was the surprise. I think we thought the game, how it ended up being so lopsided, was the surprise. They had to go from Bluffton to Heritage, not an easy bus trip. That in itself is a tough trip, and Heritage is really good, and they got on fire, and they just, one of those games for Heritage that all things were rolling for them. But I will say this, Bluffton, now having Adams Central has to travel to Bluffton, and that's not an easy trip either, so I wouldn't go to sleep on the Tigers because they have a lot to prove coming back to play the current reigning champion. So usually those type of teams like Adams Central, they're going to get their A game for the most part each and every week from everybody. So that ball game is still going to have the intrigue it's going to have, and there's going to be a lot of people in Bluffton that are going to be at that game. Yep. So if you're wanting to go to dinner on Friday night, you better get there before 6 or 6:30, because my guess is a lot of places are going to close down and be at the ball game on Friday night. But that's what makes that the fun part of the part of the year, because of those one town high school teams. It's everybody's at them, and it's the talk of the town. It'll be the talk of the town all week. Even though Bluffton lost this week, it'll still be the talk of the town because of what they've got coming in, and it's going to be a game that people should be at.
Yeah, and a side note to that, Heritage has Southern Wells, which they should win easily. So that one loss in there, you could have a 3-way tie if Bluffton knocks off Adams Central. And heading in that last week, we could see Heritage sneak back in there and be a co-champion of the ACAC. Yep. And then in the NECC, we decided the big division last week, West Noble's overtime win over Lakeland. This week, it looks to be this will decide the small division when Eastside travels to Central Noble. We talk about it the last several years. The small school division has run through Butler. I think that could happen again here, though, by way of Albion. And really, Coach, we've been at a 1380 game of the week with these two matchups. I mean, this is a big one for their conference with Eastside and Central Noble, a big one, and it could give Eastside their 4th straight small division title.
Absolutely, and new coaching staff there too at Eastside. So
and Central.
Tip the hats to both of those coaching staffs to, not making excuses, just getting it done and getting their guys back to being in the top of the league. So that'll be a dynamite game. It'll be a game that, again, will be attended well by those two communities. And, we're going to see that same thing up at Kendallville on Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be a big one there. Both teams 3-0 in the small division there. And Eastside riding a 4-game winning streak heading into that one. And reminder, as we kind of wind down here, our 1380 game of the week is at East Noble up in Kendallville this Friday night. New Haven comes to town in a big NE 8 tilt. Kickoff 7:00. Coach and Brett Rump on the call there. The PSM High School Football Tailgate pregame show runs at 6 live from East Noble in the beautiful complex they have up there. And then the postgame show at the Kendallville Pizza Hut should be a fun one there to wrap up the evening and weekend. And Coach, it should be exciting. I'm looking forward to making the trip up there.
Absolutely. We'll see you up there on Friday, my man.
Yeah, and of course, you can find us on all the social media. Just search Upon Further Review SAC on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, our YouTube. All of our shows are there. And just a reminder, big thanks to 1380 The Fan, who has since added our show as an 8:00 presentation on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Of course, you can do it on your radio dial, also via stream on the website, and through your smart speakers. When you say, hey, Alexa, tune in to WKJG or 1380 The Fan, it'll tune right in. So that's a great way to do it. We really appreciate Caleb Hatch and Brett Rump and the staff there for adding us to their platforms as well. And Coach, I think it's about time to wrap this thing up.
Absolutely.
We'll see you Friday night at East Noble for the big game. Enjoy your Friday this week for wherever game you're headed, and we'll catch you next week on Upon Further Review. So long, everybody.